Welcome, everyone. Hi, I'm glad you could join me on this session. My name's Gerry Andrews, and I'm from Leeds in the UK. And my colleague Rory will also be helping in the background. Rory and I work together in Leeds as part of an ABCD work that we're doing for an organisation called Touchstone, and we're under contract to Leeds City Council. So you might have heard Verity and Claire earlier on today on their session, and we're sort of part of that whole sort of network there. But I just thought, just before we actually get into the session itself, something which I try and do on other things is just, because I know we've all been probably popping in and out of different meetings, might have just joined this directly. But just to bring us into the room, what I'd like you to all just have a little bit of a go at is just what I call a centering process, which just brings us into the room and brings us into the session. So I just want you just to settle into your chair. Just take a couple of breaths. And just settle in so you're feeling where your feet are and where you're sitting on the chair and how your body's feeling. So it's really just an embodied process, just so that we can actually start to just settle. So we're settling in, settling down. So just a couple of breaths just to get ourselves into this space. And for me, it's always useful, I think, just before I sort of kick off with anything, just to center a little bit and to settle in. So, okay. So thank you for participating in that little bit. I'm going to just start by sharing the screen. So just bear with me. Okay. So this session today, I've called it a solutions-focused approach to ABCD. I don't know how many of you might be involved with or aware of a solution-focused practice. But again, it's very much around, very, very similar to ABCD in its background and understanding, I would say. But I wanted to really just get us looking at a particular issue, which was really around intention or attention. How do we pay attention to the people we're working with, and how do we actually start to use questions in the practice of what we do with people? But I'll come on to that in a little bit more detail. So just going through the introduction. And I think you're all familiar, obviously, with everybody else who's behind the unconference. These are all the people involved, including Dee, who's on the call here. Thank you, Dee. And again, just quickly, if you are having any issues with the ability to sort of to connect, then maybe sometimes turning your video off can open up the bandwidth, so that might allow you to hear better. So sometimes that's just a technical thing if you need that. And also, because we've got quite a few people on the call, if you just want to sort of introduce yourselves on the chat facility, and we can always pick that up as we go. And any particular questions as well, please let us have those. And Rory and I will be sort of picking through those a bit as we go on, and we'll come back to respond to those. And obviously this is all being recorded, so anything that crops up will be accessible later on too. And this was always an interesting thing that I know Dee and Michelle had introduced us to when we were doing some of that training. I thought this was a really interesting take, actually. So this idea of acknowledgement of country. Dee, do you want to just say a little bit about where that comes from, please?
Thank you. I love this, Gerry. So in Australia, we would do an acknowledgement of country to the traditional owners of the land, the Indigenous people, whether it be Indigenous people, Australia or Torres Strait Island. And so it's something that we try and make sure that we do before every meeting to kind of ground ourselves, like Gerry kind of was grounding us in the land that we're on, and kind of pay attention to the lands that everyone's coming from. So yeah, it's been something we've kind of shared globally as well, and I love this. Thanks, Gerry.
So yeah, I was just trying to think then, how do I acknowledge where I'm from? And I think the picture on the left is really where I've spent most of my life. So this is Ilkley Moor in Yorkshire. And if any of you have been following the Tour de France, any cyclists out there, you may well have seen a couple of years ago, the Yorkshire Dales being highlighted. So this is very much on my doorstep, and is largely my grounding. But my initial place of birth was actually in Brunei, in Borneo. So getting over towards UD and out in that direction a little bit. So yeah, it was just really just to make that connection, really, where we all come from, and we're all probably end up in different places from where we started, which is always interesting. And yeah, I was going to do this acknowledgement of self, which is in a sense basically the little exercise we did at the beginning. So, you know, just sitting, getting your feet on the ground, being grounded is that other part of what that acknowledgement of self is all about. Okay, so there's a little bit about me, just very briefly. I've had a broad background. As I say, I'm working for this organization called Touchstone in Leeds, which is a community-based organization, but we're also working under contract with Leeds City Council on a training program for ABCD, which is what I'm doing, but also on a delivery program, which is what Rory's doing. So in a sense, I've got my sort of feet in both worlds. So it's very much around the practice on the ground, as well as then training people in terms of some of the theory and the understanding. And I also work for myself as well as a body-mind coach and a massage therapist. And for me, this all comes together because working holistically, I have to really understand the whole person and understand their view of the world in order to be able to help them to improve or make whatever changes they want to make. And I think ABCD is very much the same sort of process. It is understanding things from the individual's perspective, but also then trying to see how they fit within their context, their environment. And the interesting thing about ABCD and health is that it also comes, I think, from the same sort of background, the idea of trying to understand what's working well, what makes us well, rather than what makes us ill. And that's what I'm always trying to talk to my massage clients, my coaching clients about, is, you know, how do we actually start to make ourselves well rather than just focus on what's wrong. So the issue that I wanted to run this session on has come about largely through a large part of the work that I do in delivering some of the training online, and it's essentially an introduction to ABCD. And those of you who might have joined John McKnight yesterday as part of the intro session will have heard, you know, all about how the basics of ABCD. But when I've been looking around at this, a lot of the training that seems to be available tends to focus quite a lot on all of the principles and the understanding of ABCD, and, you know, talking to people about what's it all about and how does it relate to the work that we do in terms of community. But when I've been talking, Rory and I have had a lot of conversations about this, that actually, you know, what actually is going on the ground in practice when, the community builders are having those conversations with the local residents, the shopkeepers, and whoever they might be on the ground. What's actually the skill set there? And as far as I'm aware, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dee, you probably all know a lot more about what else is available, but I think also there's not a great deal of training around, well, what are those particular skill sets that community builders, people use to help change happen? So, we know all about this. What do communities do best? What do they do best together? What do they need other people to do? And so on and so forth. And so again, I think we understand all of that. But how do we actually help people to change, which is essentially what we're talking about, isn't it? I think, how do we actually work with people on the ground to help them make the changes they want to see in their lives, whether it's, looking at the rundown green space there that they want to convert into a nice area, or whatever it might be, or dealing with the housing issues that they need to deal with. Whatever changes, it's all about change. But very often, we need to start to think, well, how do we actually make change happen? And for a lot of this, it's about how we talk to people, the questions that we get people to think about. And for me, that's the crux of a lot of this. And this is also the nature of the coaching work and the body-mind coaching work that I do with my clients too. How to get people to move from what might be a problem to their solution. So I think the thing is all about change and how we might be moving from a problem towards a solution. So it's that change of emphasis, for one thing. I think, and this is something which I'm borrowing with pride from Dee and Michelle around hope. Help other possibilities emerge. And I think, this is also the crux of this, because it's all about how do we actually open not only ourselves up to other possibilities, but how do we work with the people that we work with to help them see other possibilities too. And this idea also of moving from a mentality and a mindset of things that are always being done to me or for me, which is often what goes on in communities, to a state of mind where things are happening by me or actually through me. And I think this is, for me, one of the biggest issues around ABCD, particularly when I'm talking to people around, what's the training all about? What is ABCD all about? And it is essentially a mindset shift, I think. It's not an approach. It's not a series of methods that we apply. It's not necessarily even part of the ladder of participation, perhaps. I think this is, it's different. For me, it very much is about how do we have this mindset that's not about solving problems, but actually trying to have a much more proactive mentality to begin with, that we see the world through a different set of lenses. And I think when we are thinking about the way that we might work with people, and actually I want to make a point here, which came up in an earlier session, where I was sort of saying, as part of somebody who might be working in communities, that sometimes for me, I felt it was important to take myself out of the equation, as it were, because I didn't want to get in the way of the people that I might be, connecting with and working with. But actually, I think it was Elizabeth who made a very important point to sort of say, well, actually, maybe for some of us, we might also be part of that community anyway, if we are living in the area and working in the area. So we are part of the community. So maybe it's not about thinking, well, how do we step out of that and take ourselves out of the equation, but maybe how do we see ourselves as being part of the equation too? But I think where we do have a role to start to have conversations with local residents, whether they're community builders, community connectors, call them what we will, whether we're trying to help people to feel a bit more motivated to do something. I think this point about intention versus attention is a critical thing. And again, this goes back to where are we starting with our mindset in approaching this work? So I think sometimes we can have an intention that we need to do this work because we want to see some change happen. We want to see people change, or we want to improve things, and we feel that things need to be improved. And there's a question there for me that whose outcome is it? Whose agenda is it then? And what is your intention behind talking to somebody, behind doing some work within the community? And is it about also paying attention to people when we're having those conversations, and perhaps losing that agenda that we might have so that actually we can start to focus on their agenda and what's important to them? So I think it's a question at the back of my mind always in doing this type of work is, are we actually going into communities and trying to do something? Or are we actually paying attention to what people are doing, but going in with the intention to listen and to facilitate? And yeah, I think we're just kind of coming back to this point I was making earlier. I think it is all about this idea about the difference between pathogenesis and salutogenesis, and this connection with health and well-being. And very often people get locked into a problem thinking, problem solving, and they are also then trying to move away from the problem. So when you ask people, what do they want? They can tell us what they don't want, but it can be very hard for people to talk about what they do want. They know what they don't want to have in their lives, or the problems there. But shifting to an idea of actually what's working well, how do we actually move to something that we do want? That then I think is the critical part of the action, the work that we're doing when we are working with people in communities. But I think one of the other sort of key things as well, in terms of thinking about, how do we actually get people talking and thinking? Unless we know where we want to go, how the heck do we know how to get there? And it's a bit like, if you're coming out of the airport and you go and ask you get into your taxi, and the taxi driver says, well, where do you want to go? And if your answer is, well, anywhere but here, well, that's no use to anybody, is it really? So in all of this, really, we probably have got to have some idea of where we want to get to, where do we want to go, so that we can actually make some steps in that direction. But a lot of the time, we always get locked into this idea of what we don't want, as opposed to what we do want. And when you think, a lot of the time, if we're working in deprived communities and other areas where people are struggling with what's going on in their lives, it's absolutely no blooming wonder, that people can't always look beyond where they are. And I think one of the things there, and this is something that somebody else is saying, is that where people have been living in a problem-saturated world, then is it any wonder that the language that they use, and the only language that they use, is problem-related? So it's understandable, I think, that people get stuck in a problem mindset. But it's a language that we use to, to talk to people, to ask them questions, that actually helps to move that along, in my view. And I think in practice, when it comes to doing this work on the ground, it's this idea about how do we actually help people to maybe look outside of the situation that they're in, to try to see some positives, to become joyful, ultimately, to enjoy their lives, to feel empowered, as opposed to spiraling down into a world of worry and debt and anger and so on. So, but I think really this boils down to then, where does our work fit in? What is it that we're actually doing that may help people move up the spiral as opposed to down it? And I think this is where the idea of the conversations we have, the quality of the questions that we also ask people is key. Because if only we ask people more about the problem, tell us more about what's going on, or what's wrong with all of what's going on for you, tell me more, it ends up in a deeper spiral of just examining and overanalyzing the problem, which isn't going to get us out of it. So we've got to maybe start to help people to see other ways to see things. And in coaching, I talk about coaching being like mirrors and windows. So on the one hand, we're holding up a mirror to people so that maybe they can start to see what life is like for themselves in the words that they use. But we're also offering a window so that actually they can start to see other opportunities, helping other possibilities emerge. So I think this again is part and parcel of what is it that we're actually doing when we're working with people. So a solutions-focused approach to all of this is very much aligned with an ABCD approach. It starts off with what's strong and not what's wrong. It is outcome focused or solution focused, where we are looking to try and identify the change that we're aiming at, the destination we're trying to reach. But it also is very much about believing that people have the capacity to change and not blame them for being resistant to that change, because perhaps they've got so used to only thinking in a negative problem way. But it also isn't problem phobic. And what I mean by that is it's not about trying to paint everything with a nice brush and wearing only rose-tinted spectacles. It's not about pretending there aren't any problems, which I think sometimes can be some of the critique of ABCD and this sort of approach too. That you're just trying to ignore all the problems, to sweep it under the carpet, and let's only look at what's positive. What's really working well. Let's just do that. This isn't about that. It's very much recognizing that there are real issues in people's lives. There are real problems going on around them. There is all that shit in the environment. There is all the dog mess everywhere. That's the reality, So, but it's what do you actually then start to do about that? And is there another way to see the world? So I think this thing around using questions when we actually start to have our conversations with people is really, really key. Because as I say in this, questions can empower people to be in control of their own change. They start to trigger people to think in different ways, so that thinking is about being their very best person, or being able to live their very best lives. And it's all of these things. It's all about actually, believing people can change in the first place, having that hope and expectancy, and it's also then starting to identify the fact that there are exceptions to problems as well. That sometimes, we have to recognize the difficulties in the questions, but actually that there are instances where we have been able to succeed in identifying those. And one of the things as well that John McKnight talked a lot about yesterday was actually the fact that we can draw upon the qualities and the gifts and the relationships that we have. And I think an important part of this is, what do you notice that's different? And what will the people around you notice that's different? And using some of this type of language in our questioning can really start to move people away from that negative mentality. But I'll come on to that a little bit more to explain what I mean. And we'll have some opportunities to share some and practice this, which I hope will be quite interesting to see what you think. Okay, so I just thought really, depending on how many people we've actually got in the room, to just hear about your own experiences in working in community and what's been your experience around your own thinking. What's been your intention behind the conversations, and perhaps how have you paid attention in the conversation? Because again, I think some of the earlier sessions we talked about outcomes, and talked about there being outside agendas, local authorities and others. Other institutions may want to include and develop ABCD as a way of working, but you often wonder what's the intention behind that. Why is that happening? And I don't know. That might be something that some of you are experiencing too. But just want you to bring yourself into this process, and what's been your intention behind the work that you do when you go in to have any conversations with people? And how do you find that you've paid attention in the process? Is that okay? So if we'll spend probably about 5-10 minutes on this, and I'd just like you to share your thoughts in small groups here. I'm going to stop sharing for now, and then come back and hear what you've reflected on. So I'm just going to create a few breakout rooms. Rory, have you got the room sorted? Well, thank you.
Did you want to be assigned, Rory, because you're a co-host?
I'll wait it out. It's easy. Yeah. Give me a break.
Well, we can talk about it here.
Yes, that's a good shout, isn't it? I forgot what the questions were now. I usually type them in the chat. It's about what's our intention when we've been going into stuff. How have we been aware of that? Yeah. I get a lot of that in my work as a community builder, because Touchstone is generally a mental health charity that a lot of people know in the area I work at. So I have to actively find pathways to overcome assumptions about the nature of my role and the nature of what else is happening a lot of the time. The way I do that is just by being really open about my own mental health, stuff like that, so that conversation becomes a very small part of the larger conversation. Like, oh yeah, mental health, it's a mental health charity. Yeah, my experiences, your experiences. And then we can move on to the sort of solutions.
Yeah. But you still want to kind of pay the reverence that it is that, yes, that's what it is. But not spend a whole lot of time on it. Yeah.
And that's it. And for me, it's all that stuff. It's it's critical pedagogy, right? Paulo Freire and all that sort of stuff. And it's allowing people the space, creating a space where people can name their world, he'd put it. And then through that naming of the world, they can make a transformation in it. Because once you can, name the monster, you can tackle it a bit more easily, or realize it wasn't ever a monster to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah, the first thing I was thinking of then, and I mean, it's obviously a skill that I probably don't value it as much as I should, but my intention is to connect people, and the kind of, I mean, there's pros and cons. So one of the cons of that is, as soon as I meet people or I'm having discussions with, I'm already thinking about who to link them to. So then I have to really be mindful of focusing and being in the now. And that I'm not here just to link Rory up to the 10 other people I'm thinking of. I'm here to listen to Rory. So I have to kind of be really mindful of that. But then on the pro side of that, I've got 10 people to connect you to. So, but yeah, that's certainly my intention. So my intention is to connect people, but my intention is also to be very present to the moment, and know when to connect people.
Yeah, that knowing when is really key, isn't it? Because especially in a grassroots community building role, bringing people to the place where that connection will actually be fruitful and not something that's maybe too intimidating or something that they don't feel. Or that they feel, because we were saying before, Joanna, about prodding people to get there. And so there's an element of that sometimes, isn't there? But then it's that balancing act.
It is. And I like how you put it, because you said, like, if I've got a friend and he's got these mad skills, I'm going to be like, hey, you should go over here. So, and I like that, because it is, it's based on relationships. But as you know, when you're a grassroots worker, you build friendships. That's part of it. As much as you try and be professional or keep arm's length or whatever, when you're working with the community over a long period of time, you make friends. You just do. So I like how you put it like that there's sometimes, and you get to know your friend, so you know how far you can prod them.
That's my dog going off.
What kind of dog?
She's a Staffy crossed with a Whippet. She's a little rescue staff.
He sounds Staffy.
Yeah. I'm just gonna have to check the door.
Radio.
Just a car. What's my train of thought now? She doesn't like it when I'm on Zoom, because she can tell that all my focus is 100% on here, and not slightly a little bit of the back of my brain thinking about what the dog's up to.
But you have now. You've paid her mind.
Yeah, I paid her mind. That's all she wants. Now she's back under a duvet.
There you go.
Yeah.
So I think, like, with friends, you get to know how much you can prod them.
Yes.
And that takes time, and you build that trust.
Yeah, that's totally it. And especially, a lot of the people I work with, it's only down the road from where I live, this place. A lot of the people, we would be friends if we'd met in other contexts.
Yeah.
And it's
just, totally.
Yeah. And I guess that's another thing about working with an institution, that there's an ethics there to how much you can enter into those befriending situations when essentially, if I got another job in a few years' time, you know what I mean? What's the sort of, that's the sustainability aspect of it, isn't it? That it's like that you can't become the linchpin.
We need to add that somewhere to Howard's critiques and challenges. There's something about the ethics. It's like the ethics of friendship almost.
Yeah. Well, for me, ABCD it's ethics. It's all informed for me through like philosophical frameworks from like Levinas and stuff like that, and like acts of hospitality as an ethical gesture of, and it's just the act of hospitality. And the way I do my work is I set up a load of chairs, we get a sound system out, and we give away free food, and we just talk to people. But there has to be an act of some kind as a community builder. You have to act some way to create that space. And I think that's where your intention can become problematic if you're not really careful about what you do there and how you do it.
Yes. Oh God, I could almost type it on there. I've actually found a sticky wall that says ABCD critiques and challenges. I'm trying to find out how to write it on here. Here we go.
Oh God, Winifred's in a room on her own.
Oh really? Oh no.
Should we move her in here?
Yeah. Bring her back here.
Oh, that's an oversight. It was right on the bottom. Why is it silly that it's done that?
Well, that's silly. Unless maybe there was someone with their camera off and they dropped off.
Ah, okay, perhaps. Yeah.
Could be that.
Yeah. How long have we been? Have we been nearly, is that 5 or something?
Oh, I don't know.
I'll broadcast and say 5 more minutes.
Where's Winifred? Are you bringing her back?
I've tried, yeah.
Hang on, I'll try.
There we go.
Here we go.
Hi, Winifred. Sorry, we just noticed you're in a room on your own there, so we brought you back to this one. I don't know why it's done that and just put one with one person in, but really sorry, we just clocked that.
Yeah, just realized there were connectivity issues with Conrad, so
okay, so you were with Conrad.
Conrad's gone. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's good. Well, Rory noticed you were by yourself, so we just brought you back to hang with us.
Thank you.
What were you and Conrad's thoughts on the question?
We never had any conversation. Actually, it was just ended with the greeting, and then he had connectivity issues, and then decided to leave.
Yeah. He seemed to be in his car before doing it, didn't he? When in the last call. So.
Yeah.
Rory, can I just ask you, but I don't want to lose this language while I'm on this sticky note. I said the ethics of friendship, and then you said something else.
Acts of hospitality.
But you said something, acts of hospitality, didn't you? You called it something.
Well, I don't know, Deridian hospitality or Levinas or act. I got to know. I'm terrible at that. Yeah, remembering exactly what I just said 2 seconds ago. I can't remember. It'll be on the recording.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah. So we were talking, Winifred, about like when your intention is to connect with people in community, that over time a lot of the people end up becoming friends. So where's that kind of boundary between professional ethics and they've actually become my mate, they're my friend, and everything that's in between there. And like Rory was saying, if I left this job now and I met these people somewhere else down the track, of course we'd be friends. We're very, similar, or we get on or whatever. So yeah, there's this fine line there somewhere about, or is there a fine line?
I mean, there's lots been written, hasn't there, about befriending as a sort of concept in like mental health and well-being and that sort of stuff. And I think that's what they're trying to speak to, isn't it, really, is that fine line between, like, so, and part of that's about how much someone may depend on you as well, like your relationship with your friends is truly reciprocal, whereas the professional boundary means that it can't be a truly reciprocal relationship, but you have to try to get to that, as much to that point as you can.
I'm putting that on here too.
Yeah, and I guess, for people to there's always need to develop relationship and trust and create that environment where conversations are all open and I guess intention or mutual understanding and just building that rapport. And yeah, I mean, the more you have that, the more, I guess, you become friends, in the sense that, you know,
Yeah.
sometimes you find yourself inviting each other to a cup of tea, or, you know, attending each other's events. But I guess when it's back to business, there should be that recognition of, you know, in as much as we are partners, but there's this other professionalism that has to be observed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. And how you have those conversations is with intention. So you have that conversation with someone and say, this is my boundary. Mm.
Uh,
Ooh, someone's underwater. It was J-pop. She's underwater.
Hi. So, well, hopefully you've had some interesting conversations. Would anybody like to share what you've been talking about and what came out of that? Anybody want to kick off?
I can
Sure, I'll
kick off.
start.
Oh, no, go.
Joel.
Yeah, so Karina, Elizabeth, and I were having a conversation with the initial prompts about how you show up, the intention that you go into, and then the attention that you give when you're in. The common theme was when people are in that deficit-based, needs-based mentality, is showing them that you have power, you have a sense of agency. In fact, I've heard from other people in this community, 3 or 4 other folks who have similar concerns as you, why don't you all get together and find a solution that you might be able to have some impact over? So that's a pretty common approach that a number of us have taken. Elizabeth and I were also just enjoying the fact that we're in similar spots in terms of local initiatives, creating some kind of an animator, like community animator. That's a term that in ABCD, some people prefer to community organizer or community builder. We're both doing something similar in our respective parts of the United States. So that was all exciting. We're going to talk more about that soon.
Right. Excellent. Anybody else want to say anything about what you talked about in your group? Who else is there?
I'll jump in, Gerry.
Go on, right.
Mindy and Winifred, we were talking about intention and a sort of ethical question of when you're working with people in communities and essentially building relationships with them, which are very akin to friendship, that there is an ethical line there as a professional, which is something that's sort of you need to name and think about what the process is around that when you're, you know, building relationships, that what is your intention as a professional, as a community builder, etc., is sort of antithetical to maybe some of those reciprocal relationships that we're looking to build in some way. So it's about acknowledging that agenda and intent isn't, you can never fully get rid of it, despite how you may approach the work. I think, yeah, you could maybe speak more to what other bits of what we were saying as well.
I think I'll just add a couple of words that we put on Howard's sticky wall. The ethics of friendship, acts of hospitality, and are there boundaries to reciprocity?
Dee, do you want to just say a little bit about Howard's sticky wall as well, please?
Oh, right. Yeah. I think actually, yeah, because some people have not been on, or this is their first time on. So if you go to like don't leave here, don't leave the Zoom, but if you click on the Ideas Cafe in Kiko and you get like the blank page over on the right there, you click on something that's called sticky wall, and there's a whole bunch of different sticky notes on there with different prompting questions and stuff for conversations and ideas. So Howard's got a critiques one up there.
Okay, thanks, Dee. Yeah, I think it's a useful thing to have, isn't it? So you can always go on there and put on whatever other comments we might have. Anybody else? Vicky or Alan, would you want to say a little bit about what we sort of chatted about in our group, if there was anything that came to mind?
Well, Vicky is finding ways to engage her group, and I think it is at a point of trying to figure out how to consolidate some of the interests and work with what she has in creating new neighborhoods or creating a sense of neighborhoods among probably existing neighborhoods. That's another question too. What is a neighborhood? But we didn't get into that. And I'm kind of coming at it from the other way as a volunteer. We often find that we can create things that as a group that we want to do, and then we find that we're not able to find collaborative partners in organizations. So we've got quite an active, engaged community in where I live in Fenelon Falls, where we've been quite involved and always willing to work with city planning, for example, or other service agencies. But when we say the word collaboration, often some of them look at us with crossed eyes, and they can't imagine it. Even very small things like creating a cooking program with elementary school kids, and we go to public health and say, would you like to collaborate with us on this? And they kind of, it's just not even in their vocabulary, let alone, capacity to collaborate. And often there's a lot of suspicion we get from people like this that, oh, you're just trying to create a competition for the services we are offering. So that's part, so coming from the other side, not from an agency side trying to engage the community, but from a community trying to say, okay, your services, you're supposed to be out there to help us. And they're so locked into their programming that anything coming from the community is kind of looked at like a stance, I'll put it that way. So that's where, for me, that's the cutting edge part for me. And trying to figure out how to be solution focused in that is a challenge.
Indeed it is. And I think it's interesting that, because I think a lot of the time it can feel as if ABCD work is sort of institution led, or it can feel like that to a certain degree, whereas actually the reality on the ground can be very much it's grassroots, bottom up, which is essentially what it should always be. So I think there is a dichotomy between how far can ABCD remain as a grassroots process when it's the intention has been set from the top down for this to happen. I think
I was struck when I read Hillary Cottom's book, Radical Health, that she ran into the same problem, right? She and doesn't really have a solution for it. So I think there's something there that needs to be explored, and I'm happy to take it from any perspective. I mean, a solution focused perspective would be great to apply. But in a sense, then it would be a community group taking, let's say, a social service on as a client.
Indeed.
And I don't know if we have a capacity to do that. So it runs all sorts of funny dynamics going, and it's I don't see a way forward at this point.
Well, I think that point about the role of the institution is very much what Rory's talking about in your session, sort of later on, 10 o'clock this evening, BST, whatever that is, I think, wherever you are. So, okay, right. Well, we'll get back on to the next part of the session.
If I could just make a quick comment.
Please go on.
And that is, I loved it when it made my day when Lee said that kind of discovering the gifts of head, heart, and hand and relationships is like a treasure hunt. I mean, we've been kind of looking at, inventorying or doing the mapping the assets is kind of a task. And this, like, I love it. This is a treasure hunt. This is fun.
It's fun. Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
I think actually there's one thing I was just trying to find in my notes from yesterday's session. It goes back a little bit to what John McKnight was saying when he was explaining the six building blocks in a sense, and it brought exactly that back to me when he was talking very much about it all being about connections and relationships, because all too often I think we get locked into this idea of an inventory and asset mapping, and that becomes the focus for a lot of ABCD work on the ground. Whereas actually that's just the starting point. And as he says, it's relationships and connections and all these other assets are only valuable if they're connected. And that's the point, isn't it, really? It's all well and good having a list of everything, but so what? So I think it's just very much about that, how do we connect with people ultimately?
And that's sort of, let's just speak to that as well. I'll speak a bit more about this later, but that about the asset mapping, if you can build into asset mapping some sort of relationship building process within the actual action of doing it. So for me, that's through arts, right? You can use the arts in order to do that. But there's other ways where you can activate those processes sort of with an intention, but perhaps not the same problematic type of intention that we're talking about. That's like a way of upturning some of the way the language directs you. If you hear asset map, you think cartography. I'm going to, put dots on a piece of, where these things are. That doesn't work in my context because it's the communities all live in tower blocks, so everyone's on top of each other. So just a thought on that.
Thank you. Okay. We've got a short while left, so I'm just going to jump back on and continue into the solutions-focused side of this. Okay. So again, part of this process, I think, is very much this idea of, rather than maybe somebody from the outside coming in and talking to people, or even somebody from the inside of the community talking to others, but taking on the role of somebody in leadership, which can sometimes be that sort of top-down feeling in a sense, and that in terms of who's got power. For me, a lot of this is all about this idea of somebody who's there as a coach, somebody who's got your back, somebody who's standing shoulder to shoulder, but isn't offering solutions, but might actually be cajoling and pushing and asking provocative questions that will start to get things moving. And I think this role is very much around, how do we actually start to have structured conversations that are designed with intention to maybe try to achieve a particular outcome. That outcome might be something that the people, the individuals themselves want to see, but it's how do we actually help them achieve that? So part of this is around this idea of thinking about this process as this. So you've got these four different elements really here. So we often can get locked into a negative conversation where we're talking about the problem, and that might be all about what's gone on in the past, how things have been so bad, and people can't imagine a better future, or else the future is only still more of the same. But actually, how do we actually start to get people to appreciate that maybe they are coping, and how have they actually done that in the past? And surely there may be some elements of their past that they have been able to draw upon. So it's trying to remind people in a sense of moving them away from just a negative mindset to starting to maybe see the past and identify those things that have been working well in it, in order to be able to move to a more positive and creative future that they do want to see. And part of that process is then this question around, well, okay, what do you want to see instead of the negative situation that you see yourself in? What is it that you want instead? That's a critical question, I think, that we need to maybe start to get people to think about. And quite often we see this as being the typical process, whether it's within organizations, within communities, or within structures. We often might start off by identifying a problem, an issue. We then start to think about, well, how do we actually, what do we do about it in order to improve the situation? So we decide on an action, we take that, and then when we take the action, we review and evaluate and say, well, okay, did that work? How did that work, or didn't it? So the review then creates another set of questions, which can create another set of issues. So we end up going around in a circle again if we're not careful, just from this idea of, issue, decision, action, review. What the solutions-focused approach does is it suggests a different way of looking at this. Oh, sorry, that should say solutions-focused rather than problem-focused. So we might have an issue, but rather than immediately thinking, well, okay, what do we do about it? We ask ourselves, what are the noticeable differences that we want to see in relation to that issue or problem? And we can list all of these differences that we'd rather see. What is it that we want to see instead? And we can then start to look and see, well, are we noticing any of these differences right now, even a little? And then we might decide on an action that moves us to doing more of what has generated that difference to begin with. And when we do that, we start to then say, okay, now that we've taken that action, now what differences do we notice? And do we need to do more of those things that are getting us those differences? Apologies for my spelling there. So again, this is very much around actually noticing the differences that we want to see, rather than getting stuck into just what's the problem and how do we do something about it. And this moves the conversation away from a problem-focused one, because we're trying to see, well, what's working well, what are the differences that we're noticing. And this is the solution-focused process around that. So imagine when we overcome that issue, what differences would we notice? And we go on and make that list. We could also ask ourselves, what differences would others notice that would tell them that things had changed? And we could go on and continue that list and ask ourselves again, who else? Who else is out there? What might they notice that's different? And each of these different people might give us different answers. So we can start to build a bigger picture of what noticeable differences we could make. And knowing what makes those differences happen, we can start to move towards a better future that way. So that's part of that sort of iterative process where we're building on the previous stage, but we're not creating another problem. We might be creating greater options, a greater set of options. So again, just before we go on to what I was wanting to try and do, I just want to pause there for a second and just bring us back into the room here and say, just in what I've explained there as that process, that idea about noticing differences, is everybody sort of fairly sort of clear about that, or is that are there any questions around what that means? Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Because what I want you to try and do is we're going to break out into pairs, and what I'd like you to do is to try that question. Okay.
If I could just
Gordon, yes.
Yeah, it just struck me in a lot of my other work. I've used this. It's called the Aspen Institute change process, and it has many components to it. But the most important thing, and I think I like a lot, is you start with. It's a backward planning process. You start with where you want to be, and that helps a lot in terms of the usual jumping to solutions and specific strategies and such. And I haven't really thought of how to integrate that with ABCD, but I think it's very integratable because you have to be very realistic about the steps you have to get there. It's a 5-step process. But I think the most important thing here is I really think you got to start with your asset, where you want to go. The minute you start with an issue, you're in the hole already. And I've had we have planning groups in our regional ones in our area, and it's just depressing. They said, okay, we have all these problems, and by the time you're in the problems, you say like, oh my God, you're so depressed. People just pile on the problem. We have no public transportation in our area, for example, in a town of 2,500. So they came to do a planning session. It was like, my God, by the time we got through it, we were drained. And they say, okay, what are we going to do? Oh, the state will come riding in and provide us a bus and drivers. And, that's in our cheap state, that's never going to happen. So, it's so much better to start with, okay, what do we want?
Yes.
And what is our aspiration? And then work backwards. And you can be very practical in the groups I've worked with. We're trying to change the campaign finance system in our state, and which is a tough job. But it's really we had to be very realistic and check our assumptions about what our actions will do to actually get us where we want to go. And so but I've never thought of actually implementing, it'd be quite easy to actually link the steps to your local assets. Add that as almost a step in the process. But I have a healthy skepticism of starting with your problems. And to me, that's one of the gifts of ABCD is you start with what you got and figure out what you can do with what you got first, and then go from there.
Absolutely. I think this is where the solution-focused approaches are very much aligned with ABCD principles there. So even though, we probably start off with an issue or a problem to begin with, because that's what is bringing people's attention, but you don't get stuck in over-analyzing the problem and thrashing it to death, because that, as you say, it doesn't get you anywhere. So it's this idea then about what you want and working backwards, which is exactly what this process is about, I think. So just in terms of the question, let me just copy that question in to the chat. If you just bear with me 1 second. Because again, it's just this process about, having the sort of the way to ask it, and what how to practice it really, which is sort of what I want you to try and have a go at and see what do you make of that. So let me just put that in. Okay, so what I want you to do then is perhaps in pairs, one person, and you both have to go this each way. One person is sort of saying, I have an issue and I need help now because it can't go on like this. Okay, so that's your starter. But I want then the other person to sort of say this. So suppose there was a solution. What difference would that make for you? And how would you know? Or how would that help you? So you don't even need to know anything about the problem in that sort of sense. And does that make sense? I just want to try and sort of see how that might play out and see how, see what you make of that. I'll be interested just to see how that sits. Okay. Rory, you okay with that? Just so we get everybody in pairs.
Actually worked. There you go. Oh no, we've got one Karina on her own. Right, I'm going to move her to Winifred's room. Well, it's silly that it just puts one person on their own instead of making a 3, isn't it?
Yeah.
I made a 3 up because I realized Conrad and Winifred are together again, and she was saying there was connectivity issues, so it might be better if she has someone else to speak to as well.
Good idea. Good idea.
Let's tell Gerry to write the question in as well. No, we can't now because we're not in breakout rooms.
Too late, Josh.
I can message into the breakout rooms. What did he ask again? Just to ask a question about a problem. Yeah. How to solve a problem like Maria.
God, now you've blown it out of my mind now. I almost had half a sentence. It's gone now. I'm singing.
The question was to have a conversation about a problem that we have, right?
Yeah, but then the question the other person asks was,
how would that be different? What would that be like?
Yeah, like what can you do about that or something? I can't remember. Hang on, I've taken a couple of screenshots of slides. Let me see if I captured it.
Oh yeah, that was a really good shout.
No, I did
not.
not.
I might have Gerry's slides somewhere as well, actually, thinking about it. No, maybe not. I should be able to message to Gerry somehow.
Do you have his phone number?
Yeah. He's going to jump out of his skin now when he gets a phone call from me, anybody.
That's great.
He must realize it's something important.
Yeah, he mightn't answer.
Hello, this is Gerry.
No, voicemail.
Who's he with? Oh, he's with Alan. Okay. I can throw you into his room.
Yes,
to
let's
ask
do that.
questions.
Yeah, chuck me in. Yeah. Oh, here's Jade to do. Jade might doing some harvesting at the end. She's the artist that's been working with us on ABCD in Lincoln Green.
Ah, okay, cool. All right. Well, do you want me to throw you in with Gerry for a minute to get the question?
Yeah, chuck me in with Gerry for a bit. Jade, this is D. You can catch Jade up.
I'll fill Jade in. Now what room? It is room 5. Right. So putting Rory into room 5. There you go. Hi, Jade.
Hi, Dee. Nice to meet you.
You too. We're being a little bit of a hot mess. So Rory and I are kind of hosting and not joining the breakout groups. And so then people are saying, can you put the questions in the chat so we can read them when we're in our breakout groups? And so Rory and I just send them all off, and then we're like, oh shit, what was the question? Oh no, we didn't give it. So he's tried to ring Gerry and Gerry won't answer. And so I've thrown him into the room to go and get the question.
It happens, doesn't it, in this world of technological. Yeah, I've had some issues this morning too. I'm sure we'll figure it out.
We will. And you do some graphic artistry, do you?
Yeah, so I'm a mural painter by background, but I've been working on one of the ABCD projects with Rory in one of our local communities, doing kind of like arts engagement and things. So he invited me along to document some of this conversation visually. Excellent. And then, you know, at a later date, feed back a visual representation. So that's quite interesting.
Good stuff. Oh, well done, Rory. Look at you go. Excellent.
Yeah, no, it's funny.
Did you tell Gerry to check his phone?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So I just rung you as well.
Oh, great.
How are we getting on, Jade?
Jade, we've got we've got a graphic artist in our organization as well. And so she's been going to, I think we're up to, so in Australia, we started at 7 a.m. this morning. It's now midnight. And I think we're up to session number 10 or 11. And so every session she's gone to, she's done a quick graphic of, so I think she's probably captured about 10. So we'll be able to shoot
that's impressive
as well.
So she's been doing that for like 16 hours or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
And Joe, are you there? Hey, Joe. You can see the top of your head. Can't hear you. Joe's Birmingham, aren't you?
Am I there?
Joe's from Leeds. Joe's a community builder in Leeds.
Of course.
Hi, Joe. Good to see you.
Hello. Hi, Jade again. I met you at Lincoln Green.
Hi, Joe. Nice to meet you again.
You were spray painting.
Oh, was I? Yeah, I do like to do a bit of spray painting here and there.
Legally.
Legally, yeah, totally legally.
Jade's joined us to do some like graphic art documentations of the conversations for sort of the harvesting element of it.
Fabulous.
Try and replicate what we do in the real world on here as much as possible, I guess, is the aim, isn't it?
Yeah.
But how long have they got, Rory?
3 minutes.
Oh, so you're not just making it up as you go?
No, it's at 20 past. Yeah.
Excellent.
Dee has your number. Dee so has you absolutely on the hook.
Well, I just know from the last breakout rooms, like, yeah, have we been 5 minutes? Yeah.
No, that wouldn't exactly came back at 15:15 as well. It was all pre-planned.
Yeah, Rory, you've got an armful of watches with all the time zones on, ain't you?
Yeah. I could do with that because I thought originally my presentation was going to be at 10 in the morning tomorrow, but then I only realized yesterday that it's 10 this evening. So yeah. I could do with a watch with all the time zones on, to be honest.
Yes, it is useful. And I've been emailing someone going, someone's dropped out. Quick, we need your help. Can you do this at 7 p.m. your time? This is an American. They've just come back to me and said, do you mean this one on the program? And I'm like, yeah. And they went, that's 1 p.m. my time. They would have turned up 6 hours late if it was by what I said.
But what an adventure, though, all the world and all these people. What an adventure. Wow.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
I think we've got over 35 countries represented.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, great work, Dee. Really impressive thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, just from the bits I've seen last night, and definitely a model that works, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's built on exactly what we were talking about, Rory. It's built on friendships and relationships, and you know, to have a planning team of 50 people from 10 countries who all volunteer They just go, yeah, we're in, we'll do it. It's good.
I'm unstable in my connection, guys. I'm going to turn my picture off.
No
See you
worries.
later.
No worries. I'll go back on mute for when they all come back.
Okay, hi everybody. We're all back in the room, popping up with popcorn, as Steve says.
Just we've had we've all been in breakout rooms. We've had Jade join us as well. Jade's an artist that's going to be documenting some of the things that come out of the next bit of conversation for us for the harvesting element. Just to introduce her.
Hi, Jade.
Hello, hi everyone. Nice to meet you all.
So, what can we harvest then from your conversations? Anybody want to kick off? Who wants to have a go? Anybody?
So I have a go. I have a go.
Go on. Go on.
In our group, was you said I have an issue, and I come along and said, yeah, sorted. And I said, well, that's the end of the conversation then, isn't it? There's no relationship built up at all. I come along, you got a problem, I solved it. Bye. We'll see you again when your next issue comes.
I suppose the response was more about imagine it's been sorted. What differences do you notice?
We're a bit difficult, wasn't it?
What's the change? What's the change that you now are seeing? Yeah. So it's almost taking it that step. So what? Not just saying right, it's sorted. You don't have to worry about it. It's what are you noticing that's different?
So that's one thing that we said. We're going to listen to what you'll come up with it.
But it shouldn't be my solution. It's whoever's solution. But
I think that's
okay.
What we were saying, in a sense of when you start with a problem, it's so difficult. Whereas if you were to go into the community and look at the positive side of things, instead of steering from the negative, look at the positive side, and maybe there's a solution then. I think Winifred was saying, isn't it? Come on, Winifred, you need to chip in about how they do it in their community. She's with us because I think Conrad's gone. I think Conrad's getting was frustrated.
Okay, right. We hopefully if he comes back in, we can help. Winifred?
Yeah, I was just saying I work for a government department that really focuses on community-led development. So we partner with communities to support them, identify their aspirations and ways of achieving them. So really conversations that we have with communities are all around what's good about their community at the present, currently, and also where do they see themselves, or what do they want to see maybe 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the line. So it's steering them to the aspirations or dreams or visions or whatever they want to see there. Then the next step would be, okay, how do you think you can achieve what you want to see at the end of the, when all is said and done? So we really don't sort of focus on what is your problem, what what are the issues currently, but having those conversations that sort of steer them towards aspirations, what they want to see at the end of the day. So that's the approach we do, and in the process obviously identify what they have locally, and the different gifts and talents that are around there, whatever physical, environmental assets that are there that they can maybe make use of to achieve what they want to do, and where they are gaps, or where they don't have any means of achieving, we then come in as a government agency and other other funders also to support them, but they do drive the process themselves.
Right. Okay. I think one of the things with all of that as well, and this is some of the things we were chatting about with Alan and I, well, sometimes though, once we can start to identify the differences that we are noticing that have been made, then the problem itself may disappear. There needn't be a problem in actual fact, because we've actually found that we are dealing with things that mean that the problem itself is no longer an issue. And I think one of the things, for example, we can get locked into solving the wrong problem as well. If we get stuck into, we've got to react to something and do something about it. It's a bit like, we're just talking about how in the UK, the government is spending billions and billions of pounds to build a high-speed railway from London to the north, and is causing huge disruption. When in actual fact now, I suppose because of the pandemic, people are realizing that they don't necessarily have to be in London 20 minutes faster than the current system takes them there, because they could join a Zoom call instead. So the problem itself, to have to be in London, doesn't have to be an issue that has to be solved anymore, perhaps, or certainly not to the same extent. So I think sometimes we end up solving the wrong problem if we're not careful.
May I add, I think that when you ask questions like, where do you want to be in 5, 10, 20 years, you get the aspirations, out there. And then what I like to go to next when I ask questions like this is, so what stops any of that from happening tomorrow? And now you get a sense of, oh, well, it's this, and the other thing. And then you can start to have a conversation, not about, how will you achieve all of this great stuff, because you put a great burden on the community to figure out how they're going to achieve all this great stuff. But to say, what could we do now that starts us down that road? So, what's a small thing we could start with right now that, for example, helps our small businesses, thrive in our community, or whatever it might, whatever the thing they come up with. What can we do right now that starts, us walking that path, so that in 5 years we'll see some of these changes, or maybe sooner. So it's, I, as a community person, whenever somebody comes to me from the city, for example, and asks us for solutions, and then they ask us to actually implement the solutions, I find that very, very annoying. Because what do we pay you for, but if you can say, well, how can we collaborate? If you're a city or a federal, some sort of government, how can we collaborate to start down that road and help people focus on what could be done concretely, immediately, in the right direction? That's much more empowering, and then we can learn together. Right? That's it. I always find that gap to be insurmountable in people's imaginations, because you know what? They have a life. They have other things they're doing in their life. So don't make me your department. You've got a department, but we can collaborate.
I think actually this leads us interestingly into some of the other stuff that we were talking about in the coffee sort of room, the ideas there about the critique of ABCD, which is almost that, you know, it's almost putting the onus onto communities to come up and deal with their own stuff on a voluntary basis, arguably most of the time too. So it, you know, can seem as if it's a way of saving money in a cynical sense if you're not careful, by encouraging people to sort their own problems out. But I think actually it also poses, I think, a bigger question to commissioners of projects and funding and everything else, to sort of say, well, actually, if we go back to this question, this process that I've outlined, if in fact they're starting off with what are the noticeable differences they would like to see or that need to happen in a community, it needn't be in the form of a project or the program that the person, the official has thought about, because that might be something completely useless when you're talking to people in the community on the ground. You know, so in fact, actually be saying, well, what are the noticeable differences we want to achieve, and get people to frame that. People themselves can then start to go away and do something about it. Now, as you say, maybe break the problem down into more reasonable stages, or even find those things that are working well anyway. So maybe it's the questioning that this sort of starts with to begin with that actually needs challenging then. So I think we're sort of about time now. There was just a couple of little bits I was going to add in, which was just a bit about the conversation process, about how do we come together with people, how do we encourage that thinking to expand, to open up the possibilities, in order to then maybe start to bring that conversation back into action again. But that's just a process thing, which we don't need to go into right now. So yeah, if anybody's got any other sort of burning questions that we haven't touched on, please feel free to say, and we'll sort of pick those up, or else add those into the chat. Otherwise, I think that would be the end of the session, if that's good for you. Okay, so thanks again for everybody's contribution. Hopefully it made a little bit of sense. By all means, I'll put my details as well in the information. But if there's anybody, you know, who wants to follow anything up at all, by all means get in touch, and we'll be happy to continue the conversations elsewhere. So thanks again for your time and input, and we'll see you all shortly. Bye.
Thanks, Gerry. That was
Thanks,
great.
Dee. How's that? You okay?
Yep. I'm going to
Good.
push through. It'll be another half an hour. It'll be 1 a.m. I'll do something. Hi, Winifred. Yeah.
Cheers, bye. Excellent.
I'll see you guys around somewhere else. And
No
nice to
doubt.
meet you, Dave.
Yeah.
And Rory, if I make it to your session, then it means that I've got some sleep before 7 a.m.
Oh, well, let's hope so.
Hope to see you soon. See you all later. Hi, Joe.
Do you need to save the chat, Gerry, as well?
Yes.
You click the little file under the chat. You should be able to save it to your hard drive.
Hang on. Let me just see. Where am I? Where's that? The thing's gone. Recording. Where's that disappeared?
Is it because Dee was recording it?
Maybe. Yeah, I don't. Oh, hang on. Here we go. Right. I think if it's being recorded, all the chat should be recorded as well,
Okay.
I think.
Yeah.
Hi, Joe.
Hello.
Hi, you all right?
I keep getting messages saying I'm unstable, but I think they mean the internet.
I don't know. I think we've all been getting those messages. It might be personal.
Well done, though. Done. Big tick.
Yeah, well done, Gerry. Man. Really
Good.
well.
Yeah, hopefully it made sense. I know I was sort of waffling a little bit in some parts, but into other areas. But
you can tell it was good. It was good because nobody came back into the room before the breakout room kicked them out of the conversation they were having.
Always a good sign. How are you doing, Jade?
Good map.
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, I've drank an awful lot of tea, and I'm thinking. Obviously, I've captured the little bit that I was there for, but just to give it a little bit more of a body, maybe I could watch the recording of the previous bit. Do you think that would be necessary, or what do you guys think?
Well, it depends really. I don't know, because I suppose part of this was just really trying to capture the flavour for some of the comments and things.
Okay.
I think
what do
from
you think,
their
Rory?
perspective, they just want something that's like nice and ABCD that can come out of it. That's not just a Google Doc that says these people said this.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I think it's sort, it's adding that.
I've got a bit of that going on for sure.
Yeah.
I just wondered. I'm aware that I arrived relatively late and towards the end.
No problem. I think one of the things, maybe I can send you the slides. I don't know if you can use anything from that, because I've got a few visuals in there to you might be able to sort of play with, and also maybe some of the comments in the chat. Maybe I don't know whether
I mean,
any of
you
that
can send
might.
it over.
Yeah. Okay. Joe, how about you?
The slides as well, please, love, because I can. Well, where will they end up in an email? Where will I find them?
They'll be. I think they're going to be
navigating all this at a rate of knots, and I'm not always sure I'm popping up in the right flag hole.
Well, this whole new thing, this Quico, whatever they're calling it, I think everything's going to be held in there, which you can probably access in some shape or form, but I don't know exactly. But yeah, for sure, I will send you these anyway. But I think the recording is probably going to be in there somewhere. Okay.
I'd almost like one of our meeting sessions to be on how to get into all of this that's been going on, because I'm sort of learning as I stand and what people are telling me, and I feel there's so much good stuff, and it's like a whole encyclopedia, and I've got half of a ripped page that I know how to access. So, I'm sort of passionate not to miss out, really.
Yeah, that'll be a good visual for you, Jade.
What was that, sorry?
I said that'll be a good visual for you. You got Joe there standing with half a page in their hand.
Oh yeah, that's actually, yeah. I must be off duty or doing my job. I'll write that down. That's a really good idea.
No, Joe's full of visuals.
I only talk in pictures. I can't do other ones. Yeah.
There's a friend of mine as well, which she says she's, because she can't sort of speak English fully, but she says she needs people to talk in big letters.
That is a great description.
But yeah, you're right. I think maybe one of the things which we do need to maybe have a look at in the networking sessions is a bit more practical stuff, isn't it, really?
I personally would find that incredibly useful. I this little hand that people keep putting up, I just put in because I know how to come off mute, and that's it. And I sort of think, oh, they must think I'm rude. And then once I waved my thingy about and a little hand came up, but I've not managed it again. But I noticed I've got a picture in front of me now, so I don't know what's going on.
Reactions.
Reactions on the bottom bar. If you click on the bottom bar where chat and share screen, etc., are, and click reactions, then you can do like raise hand or clap or like.
And lower hand as well is important, isn't it?
Lower your hand, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, lower hand as well, yeah. There you go, you got it. Congratulations.
You
Yay.
Thank you. Well, useful.
So yeah. But yeah, I think that might be something we do need to have a look at, because I know we've talked about this before, Rory, haven't we? And I know Catherine as well was saying maybe be useful to have maybe a separate training session around, what is it that goes on in ABCD. I think the closest we've got to that is maybe talking about the discovery questionnaire for one thing, as well as then, Rory, when you were talking about the community conversations and how you were having those.
Yeah, and there's nothing stopping us the people we've made connections with in this unconference from different places in the world, maybe asking them to come and speak about stuff at our networking meetings as well, possibly, and some of the practical things, and and connecting that in with the process, because that's the great opportunity about this, is an opportunity to build these connections with, to turn it into an ABCD moment.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. And I think, this is how we grow the community, isn't it? We've got community of practice, not just in Leeds in one sense. And
sorry,
already...
can I ask another practical question? I've got some of these, Gerry. I've stuck them into the bit at the side. I'll stick them in my ears, but it's still all talking out. So I'm disturbing every bugger else down road. How do you
have you have you stuck it far enough in the side?
Well, I can't shove it in no further. Maybe the shite, they were 199.
The only thing I can think of is that if you went into your control panel and went into the audio settings, you might have to set it to turn onto headphones if it's got a block for doing that, or it doesn't recognize them. That could be the only thing.
Normally it happens automatically.
That's what I kind of hoped it would. So I won't even start to ask where those panels are, because I might only ever be able to have these until I find the panel again. So I'll wait for the learning session. I'll wait for the learning.
We'll have to come around and sit around your laptop or whatever you've got there, I think, maybe.
Well, I mean,
I think we could do a basic.
I'm in a tiny attic bedroom, you wouldn't fit.
To bring your
the
laptop
shared
out.
Houses, I'm looking at everybody's backgrounds, and they've all obviously made an office in their house and everything. And I'm here sat on my bed with my knees going squiggly because I've got the computer on my legs, and I'm just thinking, oh, come on, real world, bring it all back. Multi-occupancy, you've got what you've got, and that's the space you've got, Yeah. But anyway, we'll get there.
Yes, you have to be careful what's in your background. Yeah. At least you've not got any dirty washing or anything there, Joe. Fine.
Be stern.
I sit on a little drum in my spare room. I sit on a little cajon, and in one of the morning meetings when I first started, nothing was really happening, and I was just tapping on the drum. And then someone was like, "Who's drumming?" And I thought I was on mute. So, yeah, I stopped doing that.
Yes, yeah. You have to be careful. I don't know whether you're on mute or not.
Yeah, it's a bit of a schoolgirl error, isn't it?
I'm gonna go, guys, because my knees are absolutely stiffened up because I've been a lot of hours with it just like this. But it's cracking. Look at us all from Yorkshire through a New Zealand link. Woo, get us, guys.
Indeed.
Really put Leeds on the map, if you will, for ABCD, isn't it? We've had, good presence of us, 5 of us in total involved with you. So,
yeah.
Or 6 with Jade as well, 6 of us.
6 of us, for sure. Excellent. So we'll need to do some more. So your session's on tonight then, Rory? 10 o'clock?
Yeah, 10 p.m. Yeah, I've done all my slides and that.
Brilliant. And so I don't know whether Joe, you'll be still about for then?
You'll be grand flower. I think I'm actually down for babysitting, so I'll just see how it goes. If it quietens off, and we'll see. Life is very much, we'll see at the minute, but I'll be there in spirit, my love. Like I was for you, Gerry. I come in at back end, and I did for Verity's and Claire's, because I'm trying to do the other ones, because I kind of said, but I thought it sounded cheeky, but I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it cheeky. And I went, I can get hold of them guys any day of week. Do you know what I mean? But I was talking to somebody from South Africa earlier, and I thought, if that opportunity took up now, it'll slip through, and then I can share what I've got. We can all share what we've been to and widen all of us for our learning, can't we?
It's brilliant, really, jumping into the cafe conversations and things as well. There's all sorts of stuff.
Best.
Yeah.
When you think I couldn't do any of this until I got this 6-7 months ago.
Who'd have thought, eh?
It's only because the Jeddah people were saying, do this, while I was going, I'm lost. And yeah, I still like real world better.
Real world, indeed.
Yeah.
We'll catch up soon on that for sure.
We will indeed. Anyway, take care on all yourselves. Lots of love.
Cheers, Joe. Bye.
Cheers. See you. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Do you need anything else from us, Gerry?
Don't think so. No, thanks again for doing all the chat rooms and stuff. That worked out
Yeah,
well.
no worries. No worries.
And yeah, I thought I had posted that bloody question, and I must have just not pressed click or something to
Yeah, it's all
post
right.
it.
I'm
But-
usually on it with typing them in, but I just
No, I should have cut and paste. But so anything in terms of your session you need doing or
No,
prepping?
No, I've done it all. Like I've just got my slides. I mean, I'll show you through them now, I suppose, if you want. Where are we?
Do you want me to say and I'll get